Mayor of the Town of Clayton, I'd like to call this Clayton Town Council meeting to order. I'd like to ask you to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let us pray. Most gracious and heavenly Father, we thank you so much for your blessings of this day, and we ask, Lord, now that you be with us as we proceed with the business for the town of Clayton, for it's in your great name we pray. Amen. All right, thank you everyone for joining us this evening. The first item on your agenda is your consent agenda.
Move we approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. I did fail to ask if there were any adjustments to the agenda.
There are none that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you. Okay, up next under the administrative items is the appointment of Mayor Pro Tem Thompson as the second alternate to the NCEMPA board.
Yes, with the departure of Mr. Lindsay, it has created a vacancy on the board. I've spoken with Mayor Pro Tem Thompson. He is willing to serve, and I'm just asking the council for their consensus to appoint Jason to fill up that term as the second alternate.
Okay, questions or comments?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve Mayor Pro Tem Thompson as the second alternate to the NCEMPA board. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. And just for the record, Councilman Thompson did notify us that he's running a little bit late tonight, so no worries. Okay, up next under introductions and special presentation is the Campo Go Triangle presentation.
They're being escorted in now.
Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Patrick Pierce, the Economic Development Director here for the town of Clayton. Tonight we have two special guests here to talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is regional transit systems, specifically bus rapid transit and commuter rail. So traffic congestion and long commute times were consistent themes in our SWOT analysis and our economic development strategy. And this is obviously a result of the growth in our region. While some people choose to live here and commute into Wake County and live here for a high quality of life and relatively low cost, I've heard at least one of the council members state that Wake County is also a bedroom community, and this is a true statement for Clayton, as we've got our large, strong biopharma and advanced manufacturing jobs. So with this growth in our region and in the town, we need to look at new and different ways to move people and goods around the region, and there's studies underway and studies getting kicked off at both Campo and Go Triangle to look to help the region really understand how we are going to, how these systems work together and how we're going to keep residents and the economy moving forward. So town staff is engaged in these efforts, and we're excited to have Catherine and Brett here to help us compare and contrast commuter rail and bus rapid transit. And so without further ado, I'm going to introduce our two speakers and also thank them. This is a month plus in the making, thanks to the hurricane. Catherine Eggleston is the Chief Development Officer for Go Triangle, which is the Research Triangle's region's public agency responsible for transit service across Durham, Orange, and Wake counties and up to 10 miles beyond the county borders. In her role, Catherine is responsible for overseeing transit planning planning and project delivery, including day-to-day management of the Greater Triangle Commuter Rail Study, which we'll talk about today. This study is evaluating the potential for new commuter rail service in Durham, Wake, and Johnston counties to support regional decision-making on whether and when to move forward with building additional infrastructure in the existing North Carolina Railroad Company-owned corridor to support service to Durham, RTP, Morrisville, Cary, Raleigh, Gardner, and Clayton. And Brett Martin is the Transit Program Manager for the Capital Area Metropolitan Planning Organization, or CAMPO as most of us know it by, which is the federal and state mandated regional transportation planning and project programming agency for the Raleigh urbanized area and covers the entirety of Wake County, portions of Granville, Franklin, Harnett, and Johnston counties, including the town of Clayton. Brett is responsible for executing and overseeing a number of transit planning program management responsibilities for the implementation of the Wake County Transit Plan, including the management of alternatives identification and analysis for bus rapid transit system into Johnston County. So I hope that gives a little bit of an overview of what we're looking at here tonight. And with that, I will invite is Brett up first. Okay. I'll do a quick little wipe down here and we'll get rolling.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you for the introduction, Patrick. Brett Martin with the Capital Area Metropolitan Planning Organization here. And I don't know if, well, here we are to advance the slides. Catherine will come up in a bit to speak more about commuter rail, and I'm going to give an overview of both here, and then transition into talking a little bit more about bus rapid transit, and then I'll turn it over to her. So moving on here, we'll be presenting some information to you today on a couple of planned regional high-capacity transit investments in Clayton over the next decade or so, including both bus rapid transit and commuter rail transit, both of which are currently being studied or will be under study within the next year. And before I get into details of the study, we want to provide a brief overview of what exactly we're talking about when we refer to bus rapid transit or commuter rail transit. So we'll start with bus rapid transit. Bus rapid transit has a number of distinct characteristics that differentiate it from what you may understand about regular local or express bus service. Clayton has had express bus service in the past with access to Raleigh when the North Carolina Department of Transportation was fortifying the pavement on I-40. The NCDOT funded the service as mitigation for removing lanes from operation at the time. And so there was a Clayton Express that was operated by, well, I think it was actually operated by Go Raleigh, but it was a Go Triangle project. And then there was also a Johnston County Express. So you may remember that. That's just regular express bus service. Some of the key characteristics of bus rapid transit include dedicated running way that is separate from and unobstructed by regular general purpose traffic, so just regular cars that you see out and about. There's traffic signal priority at signalized intersections that give buses priority phasing and reduce intersection delay for those vehicles. There's off-board fare payment to reduce the dwell time or the amount of time that buses or vehicles stay stopped at stations to collect passengers and for passengers to disembark. And so that speeds up the service to an extent. There's enhanced stops and stations with more amenities and more of a focus on getting people in and out quickly compared to what you might see with other bus stops or facilities. There are also specialized vehicles. Often they have level boarding to allow those with mobility impairments to board the vehicles easily rather than having to use a lift or something like that that you might see on a number of other local or express bus routes. And they have distinct branding that sets them apart from those bus services that I mentioned. So what benefits do these characteristics actually provide? Well, speed and travel time and reliability are really the big ones. The speed and travel time are greatly enhanced, which makes service more attractive and competitive with other modes. Improved reliability that has less obstruction or other unforeseen impediments that come along with regular general purpose travel, like traffic, congestion, it could be recurring congestion or non-recurring congestion that it's able to bypass. And then also, as I mentioned, with intersection delay. Intersection delay really slows regular transit travel down quite a bit. Higher ridership, because of this relative competitiveness with other modes, results in greater opportunity for economic development. Okay? So we'll move over to commuter rail. What is commuter rail? Well, commuter rail is a kind of a technology or a service that it's really oriented to providing longer distance trips that is mostly oriented towards your employment commuting times. So AM peak, generally between the 5:30 a.m. and 9 a.m. Kind of period, and then PM peak. 4:30 p.m. to 7 p.m. type of period. So there are typically more trips during those periods of time, and then there are fewer trips in the midday, but there still are typically trips during the midday periods and then after PM peak. As I mentioned, your stations for commuter rail are typically spaced further apart in kind of just a very generalized context of a suburban landscape. You typically see them about 4 miles apart, but there's no standard rule necessarily. And the trips on commuter rail are fast. They're about as fast as you can get. While the frequency may not be as much as maybe BRT, which can get up to 15 minutes, every 15 minutes. Typically with commuter rail, what we're looking at in the triangle is every 30 minutes during peak. Once you get on it, you can get to your destination quicker than you can on any other transit mode, and in some cases, depending on where you're going, faster than car. So that's a comparison of commuter rail. The vehicles are heavy, typically heavier train vehicles that operate on existing railroad tracks. In this case, it would be the North Carolina Railroad Corridor, and so that kind of gives you an idea of what commuter rail is compared to maybe some other technologies that you've seen, and to bus rapid transit. So just to kind of drive this comparison home, this slide shows a comparison of the service modes we are discussing compared to one another, along with local bus service. And it represents a continuum or spectrum, and it looks like some of the words got messed up there, so I'll try to talk through it a little bit. And this is with respect to certain features of each. But as you go from local bus service to the left, from local bus service to the left to commuter rail to the right, with bus rapid transit in between, you're going to have more stops on local bus service, less stops on commuter rail. Bus rapid transit in between. You're going to be serving longer trips on commuter rail than you are with local bus service and bus rapid transit. You have fewer stops. Commuter rail is oriented to providing more long distance, again, commuting oriented trips. When you go from local bus service to commuter rail, you're gaining speed. You're going up in average speed along the corridor that you're traveling. The employment trip, there are more employment trips associated with commuter rail than there are local bus service. With local bus service, you tend to still see employment trips, but you also see a lot of personal, just regular personal trips that a lot of people may have. And as you move from left to right, you have more of a service orientation toward a regional travel market versus a local travel market. So BRT is more regional, fewer stops, higher speed, longer trips than local bus service, but not as much as commuter rail, to give you an idea of kind of a comparison of how they work. And just moving on here, and I'm going to be brief on this slide. I'm going to spend more time on the next slide, but this is just to give you an idea of how these projects came about and their orientation in the region to the Capital Area Metropolitan Planning Organization's Long-Range Transportation Plan, or Metropolitan Transportation Plan. So this is a hard map to see, so I'm going to move on and just focus on these lines. There's a red line and there's a purple line. And the plan calls for the regionally adopted long-range transportation plan, 2045 Metropolitan Transportation Plan for the Campo planning area. It calls for bus rapid transit service and infrastructure from RTP to Raleigh, and from Raleigh to Clayton. And one thing that's important to mention here with the bus rapid transit corridor that you see in purple is you may be familiar with the Wake County Transit Plan, which was adopted back in 2016, and there was a referendum that the voters of Wake County approved in 2016 on the general election ballot that approved the sales tax collection for expanding the public transportation system in Wake County. A subset of the purple line is in the Wake County Transit Plan. Between Cary and Raleigh and between Raleigh and Garner are bus rapid transit projects that are funded by the Wake County Transit Plan. And the MTP identified some extensions. So I'm going to talk about the Clayton BRT service and infrastructure that's planned to come to Clayton as a BRT extension. It being extended onto the core projects that were in the Wake County Transit Plan. But also you see on there the red line, that is the commuter rail corridor along the North Carolina Railroad. That project in the MTP runs from West Durham to Clayton, as you see there. And one thing that's important to note is you see both the purple and the red line come together at the same location in Clayton. And so Clayton has been identified for both of these projects as a potential terminus. So you would have both modes coming together at the same location, okay? So moving on, just to get into a little bit more on the specifics of what we have brewing with respect to bus rapid transit and specifically an alternatives analysis that Campo plans to kick off at the beginning of calendar year 2021. Just a little background on what we are calling, again, the BRT extension to Clayton. Last year, the corridor was awarded through the North Carolina Department of Transportation's prioritization process, $115 million. That was then programmed into the statewide transportation improvement program and Campo's transportation improvement program. And that's all state funding, and that is for supporting infrastructure for the corridor that I mentioned from, really it was put in from Morrisville to Clayton. And that funding was programmed in the Transportation Improvement Program in fiscal years 25 through 2029. So the vision is that the segments, I'm trying to figure out how to say this. The ultimate vision for this extension is that it would connect into what I mentioned about the core projects in Wake County that are in the Wake County Transit Plan. So we already have, and a couple of projects are already under development. They're heading into the project development process or phase, which is beginning design and all that between Raleigh and Garner. And so that project needs to run its course so that the extension from Garner to Clayton can latch onto that, and so that it's one kind of congruent, cohesive corridor. So the idea here is that what we're working toward when we move forward with our alternatives analysis for this project and then subsequent phases from there is integrating this extension into the other bus rapid transit corridors that are under development in Wake County. Okay. Another thing that's important to note is the project sponsor that has been designated for those core corridors is the City of Raleigh, or Go Raleigh. And the expectation is that the City of Raleigh will also be the project sponsor for the extension to Clayton. And yes, they're aware of that, and so far they've agreed, of course, to be strung along as the likely project sponsor as we head into the study. So I just want to make sure that you all understand who the players are as we get into this. At the bottom of the page there, you'll see a high-level project schedule. And ultimately what that does is it takes you through all the phases that are involved here. Like I mentioned, we would be starting the alternatives analysis feasibility study in early 2021. That would then lead into selecting a preferred alternative probably at the end of next year or early into 2022. Then that would lead into what I mentioned about project development and design and in the next couple of years, and then construction in the next couple of years. The schedule that you see at the bottom of the page is the earliest a project could be done on this corridor, because it cannot be constructed before Raleigh is able to construct the downtown Raleigh to Garner segment. And another thing to keep in mind is we all know that there's been some financial impacts associated with the pandemic. And so North Carolina Department of Transportation, while they might have this funding currently programmed in the Transportation Improvement Program, they might have to do some moving things around, and that could change the funding picture in terms of timing. It doesn't change the funding commitment, but it could change the timing. And so we're going to be keeping our eyes on that. So moving on here, just for the study to cover the major scope elements that we're going to be looking at starting at the beginning of next calendar year. And of course, Town of Clayton staff will be involved in this. We're going to be doing a travel market analysis and ridership forecasting, really to help us understand what alignment alternatives are the most competitive that would get at the goals that the town may have, that the region may have for moving people with this type of transit technology. And that will require us to take a look at some short and long range or long-term operating plans. What level of service would you have during peak? What level of service would you have during off-peak periods, and so forth? And with that, we would be able to identify also potential station areas, and again, I mentioned certain alignments, and what type of infrastructure might be needed for us to get up to a certain speed. When we talk about BRT planning, it's really about getting up to a certain speed and up to a certain level of reliability. And so what we want to do is the infrastructure that you see that I mentioned with running way and traffic signal priority and all that, it's all about, okay, where do we need to put that to get this up to a level that is competitive with other modes? And so we're going to be studying and looking at that. And then also we need it to generate our capital and operating cost estimates, and we will also be doing some public and stakeholder engagement right here in northwestern Johnston County and in Clayton. A couple pictures you see up there on the screen just to give you an idea of what I mean by kind of looking at different alignment alternatives. That map that you see at the bottom is from an alternatives analysis major investment study that we did in Wake County for a corridor between Cary and Raleigh. So we're identifying what are the different facilities we could use to have this thing on, is really what that mostly comes down to. This is something that I mentioned that I have talked to Patrick about in the past and the town manager, but and I'm hoping you all got this presentation in advance because I don't want to get too bogged down on the details here. But this table really just shows you what are the operating costs for different or varying levels of service, going all the way from 30-minute peak frequencies and having weekend service up to just 60-minute service on weekdays during peak. And you see really the range, depending on where you land with an operating plan for bus rapid transit service to Clayton, the range really runs from about $126,000 to about $450,000 per year. These estimates are based on Go Raleigh's projected annual operating costs and some work that we did to understand how many revenue hours would be required to do this to connect Clayton. But ultimately, the big thing I want to point out about this is while there is capital funding for infrastructure, all that would be required for infrastructure, vehicles, anything on the capital side, that is state funded. But there is a remaining question out there of, okay, well, who's going to be covering or who's going to be supporting the long-term operating costs for this? And so we have talked to Patrick and town manager in the past about looking for a long-term funding commitment from either Johnston County or Clayton or a combination thereof or something along those lines, because this is something that when you deal with transit, you have to have that funding source for it to be sustainable for us to actually do it. But as I mentioned that, and I'm really talking about the share there that you see in the table to the right, but even so, those amounts that you see there's a very high likelihood that federal funding can be secured that would cover up to an 80% share of those numbers that you see to the right. So you could, and we have to work through the details of that, and there's no commitment being asked for tonight or really within the next year until we pretty much get finished with the study from the town to contribute to the long-term operations, but it is something we will be looking at in the study and we'll be discussing with the council in the future. But anyway, we'll figure out what is our federal funding capability there in terms of how much of a share that could take. One of the things before I get into kind of my last slide that I want to mention is we do feel like it's important to establish an ownership stake in the planning, design, and construction process for this project early. That's why we're coming to you before we're actually starting the alternatives analysis and feasibility study, is we want to make sure that you all understand what's going on and that you're involved and that you have an opportunity to provide input when your input is needed and necessary and so forth. So we want to make sure that we're bringing you along through the process as we work through all of the stages that are yet to come. Okay. The last slide, I think this is my last slide. So I already mentioned establishing an ownership stake in the planning process. For the study, the total budget for our study, which again, we're kicking off in early 2021, is $400,000. We are asking from the town and/or Johnston County, or a combination thereof, for a small funding contribution. And what I've thrown out to Patrick and the town manager in the past, and to Mr. Hester with Johnston County, was just, like a $30,000 contribution for the study. It's a one-time contribution to the study, would definitely be appropriate. And really, I don't know if I should say this, but it's not so much about the amount as it is, again, saying, okay, we're interested, we're invested, we're establishing an ownership stake in this early. And one of the things I've noticed in my career in dealing with a number of different municipalities and transportation planning is when they establish kind of a financial contribution early, their participation comes along with that at the level that it should. And when they don't, then it typically doesn't. And so that's another part of why we're asking for this commitment. But anyway, that's what we're asking for. I understand if you can't, if it's not an action item on your agenda tonight, but we certainly wanted to plant the seed. Again, I mentioned the study would begin in January 2021. One of the things that I did speak with Patrick about was when I originally talked to Patrick and town manager before on this issue, we were looking at FY21 as being the kind of target fiscal year for asking for Clayton's funding. That's still something that we're asking for, but there is still an opportunity because the study will actually go into FY22. There still is an opportunity for Clayton to say, hold on, everybody's budget's squirrely right now. So we need to figure some things out before we can make that commitment. And so considering it in FY22 is also, an open possibility. So anyway, that's why it says funding commitment needed by early September. That's when I put these slides together to come to you in August. So that's not necessarily a thing. And just keep in mind what I just mentioned about kind of when maybe a funding commitment can be made. And I think that's it. And I'm going to turn it over to Catherine. And I don't know if we should take questions now or wait because we have to rub everything down. So I can take questions now on BRT or.
Any questions or comments? I think we're good.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Again, my name is Catherine Eggleston with Go Triangle. I'm here to talk to you about the Greater Triangle Commuter Rail Study, give you an update on that. Very much appreciate being here. Appreciate working with Patrick and Samantha on this study over the past several months. They've been very helpful, connecting us with resources and information about the town. So that's been helpful, and we look forward to working with them more as we proceed through the rest of the study phase. So first, what is commuter rail? Brett gave you a little bit of an overview earlier. In this specific corridor in the Triangle or Greater Triangle region, as we're calling it, commuter rail would really be focused on giving people an option to commute in the corridor without facing the traffic on I-40, US 70. This would really provide a convenient, cost-effective trip that would take the same amount of time every day. No matter how bad traffic gets on the highway, this commuter rail trip would be reliable in the face of that. And another thing about this corridor is that it would do a lot for economic development, connecting people to jobs, not just bringing people from outer parts of the corridor into jobs in Raleigh and RTP, but we're envisioning a bidirectional service here. So service from Raleigh out towards Durham, out towards Garner and Clayton as well, to connect people to the jobs that you all are investing in and bringing out here as well. So looking at this corridor, if you've heard anything about this study over the past year, you may have heard us talk about a corridor looking at Mebane to Selma. So that's kind of the largest potential future extents that we're envisioning for this commuter rail. Over the past year or so, we've been looking at the feasibility of an initial segment within that larger Mebane to Selma region. And what we found from that initial work is that there's really two potential projects that could be the first phase of this. That could be from Durham to Garner or from Durham to Clayton. So that's really the study area that we're focused on for this upcoming year. So that's what you see kind of highlighted on this screen between those two pink flags there, Durham to Clayton. That's where we're focused. And the study funding partners, they're highlighted on the bottom. So Go Triangle is the regional transit agency is sponsoring this study. And we have funding from the Durham and Wake County transit plans, and Johnston County has also committed some funding so that we can include this evaluation of Clayton within Johnston County as part of what we're looking at as a potential phase one. So what you also see highlighted on this map here is the existing North Carolina Railroad Company owned corridor. So there's a track out there today. It carries freight traffic, some Amtrak service. So we're really looking at that corridor, building additional tracks in that corridor to support additional trains, as Brett was describing, to really focus some service and passenger service on commuting trips in this corridor in the morning and evening, weekday peak times, a little bit of service in the midday and in the evenings. So what you see, or maybe could see on this slide, is just basically a reiteration of what I just said, right? So we're talking about that corridor that's out there today that already carries some train traffic. So when we talk about adding commuter rail service within this existing corridor, we know that we need to add some infrastructure. In a lot of the corridor out there today, there's one mainline track. In order to support passenger trains in both directions carrying this commuter traffic, we know we need to add at least an additional main line through this area. Part of the study we'll be doing over this upcoming year is to really dial that in, look at where we need to add additional infrastructure, additional bridges, additional places where trains can change what track they're on to be able to support passing and that type of thing, so that we're able to carry the freight traffic that's there today and that's projected, the Amtrak traffic that's there today and projected, as well as this additional potential commuter rail service in that corridor. So we're working closely with North Carolina Railroad Company on this study as well. They've been a great partner over the last year and are committed to continuing to work with us as we explore this going forward. So in this current study, as I mentioned, we did sort of a phase one of this effort over the last year to narrow down the study area for this. So over the upcoming 12 to 18 months, we'll be focused on what you see here, these additional planning activities and some early concept design. So engaging with the community. We know that in Johnston County and Clayton, we haven't ever been out here talking to people about what this is. So we'll be working with your staff to bring our public engagement here, promote some information about the study, help people understand what it is we're looking at, and get some feedback on various aspects of what we're looking at over this upcoming year. We'll be working with the railroad owner and operator. So North Carolina Railroad Company, I mentioned, is the owner of the corridor, and then we also have have Norfolk Southern, primarily also to a lesser extent CSX, in a portion of the corridor. We'll be working with them to engage on this question of how much additional infrastructure is needed in order to support the additional service without compromising the operations for the freight and the Amtrak that's out there today and that we expect in the future. And then lastly, we're looking at engineering challenges in the corridor. Through much of the corridor, North Carolina Railroad Company owns 200 feet wide. They have one track today. It's not really an engineering challenge to stick another track in there, but there are some areas that are very congested, downtown Durham, downtown Cary, a couple other places where it will be tough to put another track through that area because of existing bridges and roadway crossings, historic buildings in some cases, that type of thing. So we'll be looking at those areas in some detail to help inform our cost estimating and constructability assessment of this potential project. And then we'll also be looking at the project benefits or potential project benefits. What are really the economic development benefits, the congestion relief benefits, any benefits to the environment, that type of thing. So there are federal criteria for those things. The federal government evaluates projects like this, funds projects like this. So we want to look at those potential benefits against those federal criteria and ensure that this project will measure up. So as we do that, this is a map of the Clayton area. Those labels are a little difficult to read, but you can see kind of on the left-hand side more downtown where we are, and then that yellow circle is where we're envisioning looking at for the potential station site, so just kind of east of NC 42 over there, where we understand that you're making a lot of investments in bringing jobs to that area. So as we look at this, we'll be looking at the potential for planning for the station, some park and ride so that people will be able to drive in from the surrounding area and get on the train to drive out, as well as connections to the local area. One other thing that's not flagged on the slide but wanted to mention is that also as part of this, in addition to the infrastructure in the corridor, we will also need to identify potential sites for a maintenance facility to support the operations and maintenance of the train cars themselves. So when we think about that, we're looking for areas that are near the end of the line to minimize the amount that the train has to run without passengers on it in the corridor. So we're looking both at potential sites in Clayton and potential sites in Garner, depending on where that terminus is. We're looking to identify some potential sites. Not necessarily lock down a site in the next year or so, but we want to make sure there's at least one viable site out there. So that's something we'll be working with your staff on as well. I think this may be the last slide here. So talking about what's the purpose of the study? What do we hope to have in hand at the end of this 12 to 18 months of work we'll be doing? So we're really looking to do the upfront planning work necessary to support a regional decision on whether to move forward with the project. And if that decision is yes, that now is the right time to move forward with this major investment in regional transit, we'd be looking to identify what is the definition of that first phase. Is it the Durham to Garner piece, or is it a Durham to Clayton piece? If there is a Clayton piece that involves Johnston County, kind of outside of the Durham and Wake areas that already have transit funding identified, then we would be needing to identify, as Brett was saying, a funding source for that incremental capital cost. So we'll be working on identifying what that incremental capital cost is, how much more does it cost to bring the first phase to Clayton as opposed to ending it in Garner, and then working with the county to talk through what some potential funding sources might be over the long term to support that investment. So like I said, I think that's the last slide we have here. I am happy to answer any questions you have about this, and I'm sure Brett or Patrick would be happy to come back up if you have other questions as well.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Super informative. Questions or comments from council? Mr. Granis?
Impressive presentation. I appreciate that. One of the things that you mentioned was the fact that there may be some areas that we're actually going to add track. And when you look at Clayton, and I may be a little too soon for this question, but where do you foresee the most challenging areas in the Clayton corridor?
Yeah, so that's a great question. We're going to be looking at, we're going to be doing what we're calling a corridor screening. So where we have our engineering team take a look at the whole corridor and identify those areas that really warrant that deeper dive. So that's one of the activities that we're getting started on now. The first pass of that has not identified anywhere in Clayton that really warrants a detailed study. We think it's mostly doable, but we'll be having our engineering team look in detail at that, as well as talk to the town staff to identify any areas where they've identified through past work where there may be potential for complexity. So we're a little early to answer that. Next time we come back, we should be able to report on that.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else? Awesome, thank you so much. Thank you both very much. Next item on the agenda is a public hearing. Excuse me. Public hearing 2020-105 SD Spring Branch Medical Park, preliminary plat modification, which is a quasi-judicial hearing for the town council. These hearings are different from other public hearings in that they resemble the court hearing where testimony is presented and the town council acts like a court of law. During these evidentiary hearings, the town council receives only sworn testimony and other credible evidence. In addition, the town council must make findings of fact based upon the evidence presented, and citizens may give testimony as evidentiary hearing as they after they have taken an oath. So that's not nearly as eloquent as Catherine always does it. And I just realized it was printed right there for me to read, Catherine.
You are welcome to my job anytime, and I think you did a wonderful job.
I could never do it as well as you do.
I'll just say we tender it to the clerk to affirm anyone who is going to present in this hearing.
I think we are still waiting for the applicant to come in. No. Anybody wishing to offer testimony, please stand. Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you are about to give is true to the best of your knowledge and belief? Yes. Come up to offer your testimony. You'll see a sign-in sheet. If you could just print your name on that, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Good evening, Samantha Willenweber, Planning Director. This is case number 2020-105-SD, and again, it is a master plan major modification. And the two requests tonight are to modify a previously approved master plan. And that includes the mixture of uses and then the uses on two of the lots, lots 14 and 15, to be able to be approved administratively unless they have to have some sort of further quasi-judicial, but I'll explain that in just 1 second. The property size is approximately 50 acres, and the stars is the public notice signs of the placement of those, and it is along Highway 42 near the intersection of 70 bypass. The original master plan was first approved in 2008. It was modified in 2011 by council, and again administratively in 2016 by staff. And as you can see, the lot summary on the right, and then an overall master plan on the bottom. In the new proposed master plan, that would replace the existing one if it is approved tonight. Again, it modifies the uses and square footage on lots 2 and 3. The increase in the overall square footage is approximately 9,000 square feet. With the increased square footage, they did submit an updated trip generation letter, and they are not required to make any additional improvements other than what the original TIA has implemented. And for lots 14 and 15, it removes the requirement for council approval. They're already designated as multifamily, but the use is being approved in the master plan, which would eliminate the need for an SUP. So the use is stated, but currently on the master plan, there's language that it says shall be approved by council, even though the use is already stated, and we felt that that change needed to come back before council to be able to make that administrative. So that is why this is before you tonight, and one of the two reasons. It is consistent with the Comprehensive Plan 2040, and it is also, it was mentioned in the small area plan. I'm sure we've all seen that beautiful plan that the town had did about 12 years ago. And the applicant has addressed the findings of fact as outlined in the staff report. If approved, staff recommends conditions be placed upon the application as attached in your staff report. And all recommended conditions are a carryover from the original master plan, and no new conditions are proposed. And these are the original conditions, and again, staff did not recommend any new conditions, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Questions for planning? Mr. Granis?
A couple of questions, Samantha.
Sure.
With respect to those lots 14 and 15 not coming before the council, is there any ramification that might occur by that not coming before council?
So generally, the way that master plans are done currently is that you set out the uses and everything will go either through planning board as a major site plan. So I'll give an example. We had the shops at Glen Laurel a few weeks ago. The council, at the last meeting, the council modified their master plan. And then at the planning board meeting, we did the 4 different site plans as administrative through planning board. So they would be subject to the planning board approval as of now in a major site plan, just not before council.
Okay. The other question I had was with respect to the fee in lieu. Typically, and you correct me if I'm wrong, well, actually, 2 questions. When do the road improvements occur in the development? The reason I raised that question is because of the fee in lieu, and my concern is if we get fee in lieu at today's rate, but those road improvements aren't going to be done for 2, 3, 4 years, how are we able to calculate so we don't come up short?
So generally, anytime there's a fee in lieu, there's a percentage added. It's like with bonds as well. We add a certain percentage, usually about 120% of the calculation. The engineer's estimate is provided, but there is something that takes into account for inflation.
And are there statute of limitations with respect to that time frame to where you could go back and revisit? And if so, what would that be?
I would have to look into that and see. It depends on, generally, if they're required to do something, they would bond it versus pay fee in lieu, and the bond would be used if they chose at some point not to install it. A fee in lieu, it would be paid if that was in their conditions as for sidewalks or something along those lines. But if it's something, a transportation improvement, they should be bonding, but we'd have to look into that further.
Okay. That's all I have there.
Anyone else? Thank you. Now we'll hear from the applicant.
Good evening. My name is Trey Adams, Raleigh, P.O. Box 6309, Raleigh, North Carolina 27628. I'm with Atlas Stark Holdings. We are the longtime developer and leasing agents for Spring Branch Park on behalf of UACFE, who's the ownership. And really here to answer any questions if anybody has any. We're requesting a text change to the sort of pretty picture plan that we had put together years ago, and we have a really solid end user lined up for this lot that should be great for the town, in this particular case in the medical world, and hope everybody can be happy with it when it's done, but we need this change to get it done.
Awesome. Any questions or comments from council? Mr. Granis.
Just a couple of questions with respect to the findings of fact. The first finding is consistency with the adopted plans and policies of the town. The response that was given was the subdivision is consistent with the adopted plans and policies of the town. Could you elaborate on that just a little bit?
Yes. I'm trying, how do I think we don't think we're changing the spirit and the intent of this commercial park of having a mix of uses in this commercial park with flipping the uses on the lot.
Do you feel that they comply with the original master plan?
I do. I mean, I think it has obviously evolved over the years to a mix of commercial and now retail uses with the Hardys, and then hopefully, residential at some point in the future. But going from a restaurant to in this particular case, to a medical use, I don't think goes away from the spirit and intent of this area being a commercial hub for Clayton, specifically at the bypass in conjunction with it was the 2020 plan at the time?
2040.
I think the current one.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. The last question would be, the third finding of fact, the subdivision will not be detrimental to the use or orderly development of other properties in the surrounding area and will not violate the character of existing standards for development of properties in the surrounding area. And your response was pretty much a parrot response to what the finding of fact was. Could you expand on that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, I think the change will allow us to hopefully bring in a tenant, an end user for the park that will complement the existing uses in the park, the hospital next door. There's design criteria in the park, and that is also going to review by the town and all the other buildings that we've done in the park. They go through an architectural board review within the park, and then the town obviously comments on it, and we've tried to keep a consistent theme of very nice Class A buildings in the park, and this one will follow suit.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anyone else? All right, thank you, sir. Anyone wish to speak in opposition? No one wishing to speak in opposition. There's no need for rebuttal, so I will turn it over to the town council for their deliberation. Mr. Granis.
Mr. Mayor, after considering the competent material and substantial evidence presented included in the application and materials of record, I move to approve the preliminary subdivision plat application 2020-105-SD, Spring Branch Medical Park. This motion is based on the following findings. One, that the preliminary subdivision plat is consistent with the adopted plans and policies of the town. Two, the subdivision meets all required specifications of the Town of Clayton Unified Development Code. 3, the subdivision will not be detrimental to the use or orderly development of other properties in the surrounding area and will not violate the character of existing standards for development of properties in the surrounding area. And 4, the subdivision design will provide for the distribution of traffic in a manner that will avoid or mitigate congestion within the immediate area, will provide for the unified and orderly use or extension of public infrastructure, and will not materially endanger the environment, public health, safety, or general welfare. And if approved, the applicant would have to comply with all the conditions that are stated herein.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Like sign. Motion carries. Thank you.
Will we please ask you to exit out the rear door? Thank you very much.
Up next on our public hearing is a street closure, Enterprise Drive right-of-way.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, Joshua Baird, Town Engineer. Just to recap on this project, the Cameron Crossing Townhome project was approved by Council in December 2017. As part of that project, as you can see on the screen, there was a realignment of the existing street network to ease flow and also to coordinate with the townhomes that were being built as part of the private development. The contractor and developer had completed the new street section, and on June 15th of 2020, Council accepted the new street, the new right-of-way, the infrastructure. From here, General Statutes 160A 299 authorizes the Town Council to close the right-of-way. As you can see here, the new right-of-way is shown in yellow that's been accepted by Council, and the red right-of-way to be abandoned. On July 20th, Council adopted a resolution of an intent to close the right-of-way, and since staff has followed through on steps to take to close the right-of-way, Town Clerk has advertised this public hearing for the closure in the newspaper. Engineering Department has sent certified mailings of the resolution of intent and letters to the property owners that are adjacent to the right-of-way that would be abandoned, and the street has also been posted with signs regarding a public hearing and closing of the street. So I think there's one other picture here. There we go. You can see this was a couple months ago. The new infrastructure, the new right-of-way is in, and the old right-of-way that is to be abandoned. Before you tonight, the public hearing, and then request approval of a resolution to formally close the right-of-way.
All right, thank you, sir. This has been noted as a public hearing. If there's anyone wishing to speak, please step forward and state your name for the record. All right, no one wishing to speak. I'll close the public hearing and turn it over to the council for their deliberation.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to adopt Resolution 2020-31.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt the resolution as presented. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Up next is the wastewater pretreatment program update.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, let me start off with apologies. I think I wrote pre-treatment down and I meant wastewater reclamation facility, the main project. I will tell you that the pre-treatment facility continues to go well, and NOVA continues to get their flow moving upward, and our staff is doing a good job supporting that transition into production. So the pre-treatment facility is doing well. What I'll share with you is some important movements right now on the $120 million water reclamation facility and pipelines. If you'll remember from the picture, I think we've got one of the lines, we've got one line in yellow there. That's a major transmission line that runs from ECIA to the new site in orange at the top right of the screen. And there's another line that will run from Little Creek over to the new facility. So two major pipelines. as well as a new wastewater treatment plant facility and the access and water lines to serve that facility in the program. Last week, the Local Government Commission approved a substantial portion of the initial $15 million request. They approved $12 million of our 15. There was a couple conditions on that. We expect the final $3 million to be approved in October. And if you'll remember, that's part of a $30 million low-interest loan we got from the state revolving fund, which will go to that first $15 million will help in project development costs. So a good outcome there. Tonight, in your consent agenda, you approved the second purchase of nitrogen credits that we had been talking about over the summer. That will enable, and again, in our plan for the facility, it will be permitted at 10 million gallons. It will have a layout of 10 million gallons, but we will only plan to build 6 million in this initial phase to kind of watch our money and be cost conscious. But our nitrogen credits will allow us to approach somewhere between 8 and 10 million gallons of nitrogen credits. So what that really means is, as other industries, commercial uses, or others come to town, we will have a facility that can be easily added onto for additional capacity, as well as the nitrogen credits already in reserve to improve that. So it's a significant step to have that nitrogen credit, and Rich Capalla deserves a lot of credit for that and what he's put together over the past year to make that happen. You will also see over the weekend an advertisement for engineering firm to design that pipeline you see on the right side, the ECIA transmission line. That is part of a federal economic development grant we got. It's about a $10 million project, and we have got $5 million of that money in the form of a grant from the federal government. So part of that implementation of that project will be to pick the engineer and attain the easements for the right-of-way, for the pipeline. We'll be going down the right-of-way for that pipeline, but from the standpoint of easements, you've got about 50 potential different easements we'll have to be collecting over the next few months. And on the other project, we'll have about 25. So significant activity on easements, but the first step will be to secure the engineer who will design the project and obtain the easements as part of that EDA grant. Another part of that project that you'll be seeing from council is we teamed with that a grant with Johnston County. They have a piece that they're trying to improve, and so they will actually be a sub-consultant or a sub-owner of the project with us, the way the EDA money now works. We did this similarly for the pretreatment facility, but we were equal partners, them on the water, them on the wastewater. EDA has now said they want one entity to be the lead agency, so we'll have to develop an interlocal agreement with the county where we'll have to approve everything to EDA, but the county will basically run their project on their own underneath us, with, of course, our supervision in that process. So you'll see that agreement coming forward shortly. I'll also say, also add that the environmental assessment has been updated. It's had one review from the state. Its final review is going in tomorrow. And so as the state and the federal agencies finish that review, we will have a public hearing sometime in the next 2 to 4 weeks, as soon as we get their comments and get that advertised. And we'll be moving sometime in the October, November timeframe to get the environmental assessment complete for the larger project. Part of that will be, as we move through that, coming in the upcoming months, and we're working on that now with the town's attorney, is a solicitation of the design builder to build the facility. We will be soliciting that. They'll have a 30-day turnaround that'll all be happening in the next couple months as well. And we hope to have them under contract sometime in the December or January timeframe. Finally, we continue to look for the best funding sources available. There's a lot of capital in the market. We're blessed in Clayton with a lot of good growth. And so we'll be working with our financial advisors, Davenport, to work on that for the best way to put the money together, to make sure whatever, it's much like closing on your house. There's lots of opportunities. And when we have to close on our money in the spring, we want to take advantage of the best one. So we continue that with Nancy and Robert and the financial group in Davenport to find the best source of money over the coming months. So It's a lot of information. I could give you more, but only to say that it is very dynamic right now, and we are really in a peak part of the program as we stand here today and as we move over the next 4 to 6 months. So with that, I will stop and entertain any questions.
Questions or comments for JD? Mr. Grandis?
JD, with respect to our schedule, overall schedule, do you feel that we're on schedule at this juncture? And if so, do you foresee any conceivable setbacks at all?
Well, I'll answer it, and we have a risk, what we call a risk register, which is list of risk, and we started with about 20. We retired a few, and now we're up closer to 30. So do I foresee some potential setbacks? I do, but we model that and discuss that in terms of probabilities, and so I think we're on a good path. The number one thing we've tried to do is, in this first phase of planning, is to not lose any time on the calendar for the upfront piece, because we think we'll need it in construction. So we're doing all that we can to save as much time in the construction phase as possible, including the way we've designed the site and doing an early grading package so that the design build contractor can just move on the site with little risk of what he finds in the ground. So I feel good about things, but from get-go, this has been it's a very tight schedule, and it's a very tight budget. So we're working just as hard as we can to live up to both.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, thank you, JD. Up next under new business is a resolution, the designation of deputy finance officers.
Good evening, Robert McKay, Finance Director. Tonight we're asking Council to approve a resolution that designates deputy finance officers, which essentially provides the authorization as to who can sign and or countersign checks on behalf of the town. The recent transition in town manager has triggered a need to update this. So this merely amounts to drop an ad where we're removing the former town manager and adding J.D. Solomon as the interim town manager. I'd also like to provide assurance to Council that the actual signature cards on file at First Citizens Bank will mirror this resolution.
All right. Questions or comments for Robert? Entertain a motion. Mr. Holder?
I move we adopt resolution 2020-32.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for the adoption of the resolution number 2020-32. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Up next on the agenda is the emergency supplement sick leave, fire department and police department.
Good evening.
Good
I'm
evening.
Alicia Barnes. I'm the HR director for the town. I'm sure everyone is aware that we've had some recent challenges related to COVID in our fire department. While we continue to pray and think about those that had the illness, those that are still in the hospital and their families, something has come to light that we want to try to address in terms of time off related to COVID issues. So today we are asking for supplemental paid sick leave for those in our fire and police departments who are regularly scheduled to work more than 80 hours in a pay period. From a background perspective, the Families First Coronavirus Act called for 80 hours of paid sick leave for employees based on various COVID-related items. So we do offer that to all of our town employees. With the issue in the fire department, it did come to highlight that we don't offer enough hours for certain shift workers in the fire department and the police department who are scheduled to work more than 80 hours in a pay period. So for our fire department, they're regularly scheduled to work 106 hours. And for the police department in the patrol operations area, they're scheduled for 84 hours. So what we are asking for is to supplement the hours that are offered under the federal program, the 80 hours, to give enough hours for those that are working more than 80 hours in a 2-week pay period for the fire and police departments. That amounts to 26 hours for the fire department and 4 hours for the police department. In order to be eligible for those additional hours, they would have to meet all the eligibility requirements under the Families First Coronavirus Act that would qualify them for the first 80 hours. They would need to exhaust those hours and then have the supplemental time available to them. I'll pause there and see if there are any questions about the proposed supplemental hours.
Questions? Mr. Granis?
First of all, I want to acknowledge that I think this is a great program, and I think we have an obligation to do everything in our power to see to it that our folks who are subjected to COVID are taken care of. And I totally support this. The only question that I do have is, how will this be funded?
So it's not additional cost to the budget. However, it is a shift where we intended to pay. So this would be hours that they would normally be working, so paid in hourly wages. But instead of hourly wages, we're paying them time off. So it's like adding additional vacation or sick time.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome. No other questions? Well, then we would like the council to consider and approve the supplemental hours.
Mr. Mayor, got a question. JD, did you say that we had some COVID money that has come in?
We do, and I was going to cover that in my manager comments. It's CARES money from the state to help that's been offset to police and fire. We're looking at right now how to spend that money, in which ways. And I think with the situation that Lee's had in the fire department, it was one of the things I wanted to take a couple weeks on to make sure we're keeping that money in the best way possible. Right. But I will say that I support this. Like Councilman Granis, I think this is something we need to do right now.
Oh, I
really
agree.
Time off. But we're looking at the financial side of this too.
But while you're making your evaluation, I do want to make sure the guys that we're struggling with in the fire department especially, I want to make sure they're taken care of.
Yes, sir.
With that COVID money. I'm sure everybody here would agree with that. But I want to make that statement. We need to make sure those guys are not put in a financial hardship. And then you know the ones I'm talking about.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Thank you.
Mayor, I would like to make a motion to approve the supplemental emergency sick leave.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Barnes. Up next is the Fat Oil Grease Program Update, Code of Ordinance Update, Chapter 52.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Today, I want to update everyone on the Fats, Oils, and Grease program. We're just kind of starting from fresh. We've had an ordinance in place for many years, but it's just not been up to standards that the town needs and wants to have for protection of our water and sewer systems. We also are going to be covering an updated FOG module that we're partnering with BSI Online, who does our backflow program that was approved January of last year. And then we're asking for an ordinance amendment to be approved at the end of the program. So basically, what I have here is just a picture of several different grease traps in locations. Some may be familiar, some may not be. That standard size grease trap in the town is 1,000 gallons. Some are larger, some are smaller, some are indoors, some are outdoors, some are even automatic. They come in all shapes and sizes, but they all serve the same purpose, and that's to protect us from grease in our sewer lines. And like I said earlier, we're once again partnering with BSI Online. They have been a tremendous help for our backflow program. Currently, the backflow program has almost 2,000 devices, and we're at a 1.7% non-compliance rate through the first 9 months of the year. So we've had very high success, and most of that 1.7% will be in compliance by the end of the month. As far as the program operation with BSI, it's a very simple program. It is designed to have the restaurants, gas stations, hospitals, whomever it may be, to input their cleaning receipts into an online database management system. It's as simple as 1, 2, 3, 4. The first 3 steps are automatically filled in, pre-filled forms that you just click on the name of your restaurant, it pulls up all your information, and you just continue through the process to get all of your information for your restaurant. And then the final step is to add the cleaning receipt information that the grease hauling company leaves behind. That is our biggest issue right now as far as our current ordinance goes. The hauling companies leave the receipts, and they're supposed to be left in the restaurant or gas station or daycare for up to 3 years. That currently is not happening. A lot of these companies either take them home for smaller businesses, or the corporate office manages them away from their site. So when we go to inspect these grease traps, we can't have up-to-date in-time inspections when we're completing the current inspection. So we have no real feasibility in going and saying this was cleaned properly. So associated with that, we will have to be making 2 minor amendment changes to the ordinance. One is basically just stating that the cleaning receipts will have to be kept in the online portal system, whichever the town is currently using. And that is word for word the exact same ordinance that we adopted last year for the backflow program. This is a slight change to the current ordinance here. Is currently the sewer use ordinance is what's being amended, and it has for chapter 10 is the administrative remedies for all enforcement, and that's more geared towards industrial uses. So most restaurants aren't industrial users, so that does not apply to most of them, and so the fines and such are associated are too great, in my opinion, for a restaurant to be held accountable for. So once again, we're just making things simple. We're changing the FOG program enforcement to the same that we currently have enacted for the backflow program, just changing a few minor words here and there to change the meaning from backflow to grease trap. This is new. This is part of the enforcement plan that we're adding. It's basically a schedule of the different types of violations, the actions required, time frame allowed, and ultimately what we will do to remedy the situation if the restaurant does not come into compliance. And then finally, by the end of the year, we're going to have this fats, oils, and grease amendment done. We've talked about sewer service extensions and repairs, and then we're also working currently with food trucks and commissaries. All those updates will be coming in the future. Any questions?
Questions or comments?
I got one.
Mr. Bone?
Brandon, right now, so when a grease trap is pumped and there's a record supposedly left on site, correct?
Yes, sir.
So we don't require them to keep those at this point?
We do require to keep them, but like I said, the grease trap program is kind of starting new. Lots of people are unaware of this requirement, so we're trying to educate the public and the restaurants on what needs to be kept and how they need to handle the situations. But like I said, a lot of the records are kept, they're just not kept or ease of access for us. This new software that we're going to be using basically makes it instantaneous. Once the food service establishment or the hauler, because it's a partnership between both, once it is entered in online, we will have instant access to know when it was cleaned by email every time a record's entered.
Because the situation I'm in, you know, I got a facility in Raleigh that I have to do that, but I have to keep a paper copy. And that's it?
Yes, that is what's currently required. We're still requiring that to be kept in the restaurant, but we're also making it so that we have the instant access on the internet so we can pinpoint.
So you're asking the customer to submit it
to the town.
electronically to the town?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I'll add to this too, with what we're doing with the wastewater treatment program and the type of environmental friendly customers we have now and trying to attract. This is very important. It seems like a burden on restaurants, but this is what causes a lot of sanitary sewer overflows and will get us notice of violations and a bad rap with DEQ. So whatever we can do to make this as proactive and as positive as possible, I think is a good move right now, especially as we'll be building a new facility and making switchovers in the sewer system, so.
Absolutely. Questions or comments? Mr. Granis?
Brandon, I just want to acknowledge you for the job that you're doing because I think it's great. I know before you got here, I think we were trying to do a good job, but we just didn't have the tools to do it. And I'm not all too convinced that we even had the personnel to do it. But I do want to acknowledge you because we're getting real close to getting this thing behind us. And thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
All right, anyone else? Okay, if not, I'm going to call for a 10-minute recess.
We need to do it.
Just get them to adopt that ordinance.
Need to do it.
I want to adopt the ordinance before we call for break. I'll entertain a motion, Mr. Granis.
Mayor, I make a motion that we approve the adoption of ordinance number 2020-09-01.
Second.
And a second for approval. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you. To call our meeting back to order, the next item on the agenda is the Code of Ordinance Update, Chapter 50.
Mayor and Town Council, Rich Capola, Public Services Director. This is an item to clean up something that was discussed about this time last year regarding replacement of sewer taps and water taps. Essentially, the clarification here is to ensure that property owners understand that if there's damage or due to age or just other issues outside of their control to their sewer or water taps, that the town will replace those from the right-of-way, essentially where the clean out or the meter is, to the main as part of our normal maintenance routine, and there will not be a charge for that. Obviously, if the damage is caused by the owner or the request is to relocate said tap or sewer service at their request, there will be an associated fee as shown on the current comprehensive list of fees, but the clarification is to ensure that existing taps that are either damaged or worn out due to age will be replaced at the town's expense. Is there any questions?
Questions or comments? All right. Thank you, Rich. Council for their decision.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion we adopt ordinance 2020-09-02.
Second.
Motion and a second for approval of adoption of the ordinance. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Like sign. Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is a budget amendment for a deputy town manager position.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, and I actually have the next one too, and Rich will support me on that one. But for this one, this is the request for a budget amendment for a second deputy town manager. A couple observations here. One, in looking at the number of direct reports for the manager, it is a lot. Nancy Medlin, our current deputy town manager, has a number of reports herself. And as we look at that, I think we're moving at a point with the capital projects we've got that we really need Nancy to continue finishing her finance and some of her programming roles that she's doing with the town with her experience. And I will really need, and the future manager is really going to need a second deputy town manager to really integrate our capital programs and the construction and the different electric, gas, power, parks, everything we need from that implementation. So that'll be the primary thing. I also think we're going to need, with the amount of contracts that we have coming in the door, the budget amendments, the number of reviews we make, I would like to make sure that we have a second deputy town manager to help me on that side. I foresee me and Nancy, and the way we'll handle this is Rich Capola is my recommendation to move into this position right now. But he will, his position will stay open, and he will assume additional responsibilities and have authorization similar to what Nancy and I will have. Basically, it'll just be an elevation of Rich into a new position with some new authorities for now, and to help us with the reviews. I hope that I'm out, that Rich and Nancy have full confidence they can cover everything that has to be done. Or if Nancy is out, me and Rich, or if Rich is out, me and Nancy continue on like we are. But I really see a lot of work coming this way, and I really think that this will be something that your new manager will look for based on the activities and the depth and the breadth of what's going on in Clayton in such a dynamic and growing environment. One of the things we'll do with leaving, we're not going to, the question always gets asked by everybody, well, how does the direct reports change? I'm not going to change any of the direct reports right now per se. Rich will keep his current direct reports. I will keep mine, and Nancy will keep hers. But what we will do is we got a couple things in progress. We got a budget review per our budget. We're all supposed to look at that in November, December. I think HR has a wage and compensation analysis they're doing, and you guys have asked me to look at the longer term organization of the town. So what I want to do is keep Rich's position still open and bit double hat him like I'm a bit double hatted. And we'll make some decisions as we move toward December or January with how we maybe restructure some of the reports. But for not, right now I want to focus on functions and not reports in making this move.
All right, that
So I'll
sounds good.
stop there.
Thank you. Questions or comments for JD? All right, if not, I'll entertain a motion. Ennis.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we adopt the ordinance number 2020-09-03.
Second.
Have a motion and a second for for adoption of the ordinance. Is there further discussion? All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Okay, up next is the creation of a new position, Assistant Program Manager.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this is a request that the former manager and I discussed about needing for the program. It is a big program. We need somebody to assist. Even if I was still there in my former role managing just the program, we would need this. This could be hired from a consulting firm, but based on the workload that I've seen up to this point, and especially some of the capital needs and issues we've got, it is apparent that the town would be better off hiring this position for the long run and keeping this position in-house to the extent practicable. We would like your blessing on it tonight so that we can advertise it as soon as possible and report back to you on who we're going to hire in this position. This will be a mid-level position. It's one that we see from an assistant program manager helping on a $120 million program, which should attract quite a few candidates. But we also see the need to swing over and help Joshua Baird in his role as the town engineer and the capital improvements manager to work under him and assist him with projects that integrate in with our larger program and our larger town needs. So this would be a mid-level position, as we've said, and I think it's one we may need more in the future, but we may hire that with consultants, but this is certainly a need we have right now.
All right, very good. Now, any questions or comments for JD? All right, if not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion we place this on the consent agenda for September 21st. I believe that's correct.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Item will be placed on the consent agenda for September 21st, 2020.
Right, and Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, we will go ahead and advertise this position, but we will not hire this position until you guys have obviously had the next meeting.
All right, very good. Okay, now we'll move along to staff reports, beginning with the manager.
Staff reports with the manager. So let me take my mask back off again. So a couple things to report, several things to report. We had a meeting with the department heads last week on my official day on September 1st, which was a week ago. And so we met with department heads. I've also met with some of our leading external people in the community to start those discussions. Three things I normally do when I get started, and we've started all three of these, but we talk with human resources on what are our human resources issues. We don't have a lot, but every organization has a few, so I've already covered that with the HR director. Our health and safety issues, and that's not just COVID, but that's all our health and safety issues. And so understanding where some of our gaps and our emphasis may be needed going forward. Everybody deserves to come to work and go home safely at night. And so I want to make sure first and foremost right out of the gate that any improvements we need there, that we're making those. And the third thing, in addition to human resources and health and safety issues, we've looked into legal issues with council so that I've been briefed on all of those and are well aware of those. The other thing I'll say, there are a number of what I call special issues. One of them goes back probably 15 years, and I'm familiar with it in a different capacity. But I have been looking at a number of special issues. I've not gotten to all of them, and I'll apologize in advance, but I've already been taking on a few of those to put those to rest. We also had the governor's announcement last week of the reopening of 2.5, and our parks would open up on Friday before Labor Day weekend. And so I'd like to compliment both Scott Barnhart and Stacy Beard for doing a great job. I asked Scott, he thought at first it was all about COVID, and I said, no, we've not opened our parks in 6 months. We need to do some inspections to make sure they're safe in all regards, including COVID, but also just the monkey bars are safe. He found a few defects. I think he and his staff worked hard to get those corrected. But I think what he's done is was able to report a great opening weekend, and I'm not aware of, talked to him today, and I don't think if there's any major issues or complaints and things were able to open on Friday before holiday weekend as the public would expect. We also had a meeting last week. Ironically, we did not have any hurricanes in the Atlantic as of last Thursday, but we met. We've got our normal hurricane response, but we've also got some strained issues, as we're all aware, with the fire department. So I wanted to make sure that all the different public services were ready to go. In the event we had a storm, we had 2 actually form over the weekend, but I don't think they're going to get us. But we're approaching that. So we have tried to go back through all our hurricane policies and our disaster, both our preparation and our disaster cost recovery, to make sure that we can handle the crisis, whether we're under COVID restrictions or not, that we'll be able to go. A couple other things I mentioned earlier, the CARES money, which is related to the COVID, that'll be coming from the state. Some local governments are returning some of that money to some commercial initiatives where people have been hurt. Some of the businesses have been hurt, and some are returning them to the general public, a portion of that money. I've asked that we hold that till the next meeting. I want to review that in more detail. As Councilman Bunn said, we will make sure our firefighters are covered and all our emergency services folks are covered, and we want to make sure that we have thoroughly covered any outstanding issues with the budget. So we will bring you back some recommendation on the CARES money, but we want to think it over. I want to think it over for a couple more weeks about where the best use of that money may be. We also had a request for, I'll get to the other request there. Well, let me go ahead and say the police department has a request for some additional money, some restricted money that flows to them. They had some budget requests. They had 2 requests to how to spend that money. I asked that they also, since we're deferring the CARES money, that we just put all these new requests for money on the next meeting so that we can thoroughly vet and I can understand how they're spending their money and where they're spending it. It's not a question of if they'll spend the money. It's their money. It's a restricted money. But we want to spend it in a way that I and this council think is the wise and best use of that money. I also discussed with the financial group and Endgame in particular, if you remember the governor's kind of forgiveness of paying the bills or no cutoffs for 4 months, racked up quite a bit of money. We had about $400,000, as all of you know, through June 30th. It is still hard a little bit to figure out how much of that is ongoing since June 30th. But in meeting with Ms. Game and looking at the numbers, we will probably recover. We've got about half the people signed up for the payment plan. About half aren't. Maybe less than half, maybe a third aren't. Pretty close. But we're going to have those folks either sign up or we're going to start cutoffs soon to try to get people to pay. We hope to collect as much as 90%. I probably put it at between 75 and 90. I like probabilities. So probably somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000 is probably what we're going to have to write off in our budget to COVID-related things. I hope we don't have to do that, but again, as we look at our budget, as per the budget you guys passed, we need to factor all these things in that November, December timeframe. And finally, again, I think I mentioned there's been several projects that have some new capital needs. One of the things that we've seen, and you heard that in the earlier thing of the deputy manager, the new deputy manager, but really a need to integrate and make sure that we're leveraging our money in the right places with just not enterprise and general fund, but we're really putting that in all the best places. And so we've already started tracking some of those issues, and we'll be continuing to work on those in the coming days and weeks. So I'll stop there, and it's been a busy first week, and I'll be glad to take any questions from staff report standpoint.
Questions? Mr. Granis.
JD, with respect to the utility payments that you say we may have a shortfall for somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000, could any of the CARES money be applied to that to offset that shortfall?
It could be, and that's the value decision that I think we hopefully will bring to you guys about some of our needs, that whether we return that money back to the community that may have suffered from this, or that we may need it to do something else with it. To me, it's all budget money in a way, and we've got to understand what's going out and what's coming in. And so I just want to make sure before we start giving away money that we understand where the other money may need to be.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? All right, thank you, JD. Town attorney?
No report.
Town clerk?
No reports, thank you.
Any other staff? All right, if not, it's time for informal discussion and public comment.
Yes, the first person we have for public comment is Ryan Hendrickson.
Get this thing off. Can't talk with that thing on. Good evening, my name is Ryan Hendrickson, and I live in the Riverwood area. And I was just coming to request to see if we could open back up the utility building, wear masks, you know, because of COVID-19. And so that way we don't get that extra charge of $2 if you're paying over the phone. I'm renting, so I don't want to do automatic payment through my bank. And so, you know, I've went through every single way I can think of, so that way I can go around any extra charge. And my closest bank is in Charlotte. It's US Bank. And in order for me to get a money order, I had to use cash. I had to use my card to go to an ATM, get charged for that, and then go to the money order, get charged for that, and then finally bring the money order here. Over the phone, it's just $2 and I think some change or whatever, which if I had plenty of money, then it wouldn't be a problem. But I speak for most of Clayton when it comes to budgeting. I don't have any kids, but I have friends that have kids, and they want to know about the solution to possibly opening up, going in, paying your bill, and getting out. It takes 5 minutes to get in, pay your bill, and get out. I've been doing it for a month before quarantine. I moved here January, started renting in February in Riverwood, and I love this place. I love the town. I'm from East Tennessee, and it's kind of quaint here. I was just wanting you guys to know that and see if we can make that happen.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Next up is Timothy Weiss.
Thank you. Take me a second to set this up. Can you tell me the camera for YouTube, which way does it point? Is that it up there?
It's right at you.
That's it? All right, so,
It's facing you now.
oh, it's at me? Great, okay, so this is what we're gonna do then. I made this up the other day because I wanted to be socially distant, but I want you all to see what I put together. This revolves around the meeting that I watched on YouTube when the council decided that they wanted to ask for Adam Lindsay's resignation, okay? I was a little dismayed over that, and I wanted to do some digging, and I wanted to look at some of the reasons behind it. One of the reasons that I found was when Adam was hired here in 2016, he was paid $147,000 a year. Is that correct? Who was here when he was hired?
I believe that's correct.
Great, thank you. By the way, who were the three council members that voted to have him turn in his resignation? Can you raise your hands, please? Mr. Bunn? Mr. Granis? Where's the third one?
He's not here.
He's not here today? Okay. This is a problem because when you look at the statistics of towns of comparable size in the area in 2016 of actual pay of town managers, the average in 2016 was $114,000. He was set up for failure, okay? This was his very first job as a town manager. I want everybody to understand that. First job. He was an assistant in Southern Pines. You guys came in here and you paid him more money than what seasoned town managers made in Garner, Knightdale, Fuquay in 2016. There's more to the story. Every year, he got a raise. 2020, when y'all asked him to go by giving his resignation, he was making how much? $173,386, is that correct? That's what it was up to. That amount of money, factual money, was an average of 4.5% increase. I have to ask you two, since you're the only two gentlemen that are here, 4.5% increase every year for a guy that you guys didn't consider leadership material and you asked him to go. Why did you continue to give him an increase if you had any question about whether or not he should stay as a town manager? That's concerning. It's concerning to a lot of people, a lot of folks in our town, everywhere we live. Now, the next part that comes up is we have Mr. Solomon, who's doing a great job for us. Mr. Solomon is offered a position to take his place, which is approximately 60% more than what Mr. Lindsay was getting paid. Great negotiating, guys. Great negotiating. 60% more in a temporary position. How hard do you think that's going to be to find the next new town manager when we look for somebody on a full-time basis? When they see this kind of activity, where Adam wasn't given an opportunity to become the leader that he wanted to become. Now, the end result is us taxpayers, people like me who moved here a year ago, who love this town and love this area, okay, we're going to have to pay the debt. That money could have been used for people who need COVID assistance. That could have been used for people whose businesses have collapsed, like Wine on Main, Spectrum Paint, and my business, which is gone. This was a terrible time, and it looks really bad on you guys. Because do you know how much money extra we're paying because of the decision to ask him for this resignation? Does somebody want to tell me how much we're spending as a town? Does anyone have the guts to say it? $233,038. $233,386. Okay? With that, I'm going to give you an invoice. And here's an invoice for Mr. Thompson. Give this to Mr. Stock.
I will. Thank you.
The invoice is for $77,793. That's what each of you three guys owe the city of Clayton. It's not what we hired you for. It's not what we elected you to be. We elected you to look out for the interests of us as people. You're not doing that when you're wasting that kind of money. I am pretty sure that if you guys had worked with Adam over the course of 4 years, he could have become the leader that you wanted. I'm pretty sure that he would have taken the job for what the going rate was instead of being overpaid. Now you want to knee-jerk correct the situation. Now we get to pay Mr. Solomon a whole extra bunch of money. That's not right. That's not right to us citizens. That hurts us and that doesn't help our outlook. So I'm going to tell people now, I believe you, Mr. Bunn, Mr. Granis, and Mr. Thompson, I believe you all three should resign. Resign immediately, because you're not looking out for the interests of this town by the two actions that I saw on television on YouTube on August 28th. If anybody wants copies, if anybody here from the media, I have the backup data on what I'm talking about. It's all legit. You can look it up. You can talk to NCLM, and you can find out what the going rates were. We made a terrible decision, and we compounded it by doing it again. I hope we have new people in here by the time we find the right town manager to take over on a permanent basis. Because that's what we need. We need the leadership that's going to do the job for the people who live in this town. Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next is Caitlin Rogers.
Give me just a second. I want to use some hand sanitizer.
All right.
I give you guys your handouts.
Thank you. You're good.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Caitlin Rogers, and I live here in town in Clayton. I'd like to begin by thanking the council for holding this meeting and all of the projects that have done very well in our community. I am here today to discuss the community's outrage, as you may have heard or read online, regarding the new salary of our interim town manager, Mr. Solomon. Though there are several disparaging salaries in our town, according to the 2019 North Carolina League of Municipalities Salary Survey. I took the liberty of highlighting some of those other positions for you in the handouts I've provided. Now, as you can see, many people have been doing their duty to research public salary and economic growth records from around the state and country. As a whole, we simply cannot understand why our townspeople are paying salaries so disproportionately higher than that of communities with comparable populations and economies. This includes taking into account the next population group that the town of Clayton is moving into. This mismanagement of Clayton funds is concerning. In regards to the interim town manager's salary, it is roughly an extra $8,400 per month more than the average. That is unacceptable. $8,400 is nearly double our community's median monthly household income, nearly 10 times the inflated monthly rent I pay. Lest we forget that a household income includes all members in the household. Typically, that is not just one man. It does not matter what, as individuals, we think our work is worth. That is up to the people we work for. And does this municipality not work for the people of Clayton? I simply request a more in-depth explanation of Mr. Solomon's 6-month contract. We understand and appreciate that his expertise and experience demand a higher wage. However, when one works for the town, they should not be paid lavishly by our people's tax dollars. Even if we combine the average town manager salaries and the average project manager salaries of the 2 population groups that Clayton can be included in, the town of Clayton is still by far paying the highest salary for this position. The community has the right to know exactly how our local government salaries are being calculated and determined. For your perusal, I have supporting documentation for my claims. Again, you will see the relevant data is highlighted. Firstly, pages 1 through 4 are simply the table of contents from the salary study and the populations of North Carolina municipalities. If we could turn to the top of page 5, you will see the maximum Clayton city manager salary in 2019 was $220,000 a year, roughly $18,350 per month. On page 6, you will see the average salary for the next population group is $172,000 a year. That is $4,000 less per month than that of Clayton. The 2 highest city manager salaries in the population group, in the next population group, are Wilson and Chapel Hill. Their populations are double that of Clayton, yet those salaries are the closest to what our townspeople are paying. Taking into consideration the dual position that our interim town manager is in, please refer to the highlighted content on the right side of both pages 7 and 8 for project manager salaries. Again, you will see the average and highest paid salaries from both population groups that are comparable to Clayton. The average project manager salary for the population group Clayton was a part of in 2019 was $63,000 a year. The next population group's average was $76,000 per year. To summarize, if we were to add the average city manager salary to the average project manager salary, each of these totals coming from the larger population group, the total salary would be $248,000 per month, roughly $248,000 per year, roughly $20,700 per month. We are still paying approximately $3,300 per month more towards our new town manager, or our interim town manager salary than the 2 roles he is to fill combined. After providing you with my facts, and in addition to a transparent and lengthy explanation on how this financial decision was made in good faith and consideration to the taxpayers of Clayton in the middle of a pandemic, I implore you to put into effect immediately a policy to protect the people of Clayton to prevent such discrepancies in the future. I propose the council enact a policy to put a salary cap of a 10% increase of the average North Carolina municipal salaries from comparable towns' previous fiscal year salaries. This 10% increase should not be automatic, and it should be considered in increments based on performance. This policy should also be enforced on any and all temporary or short-term contracts. All positions on the town of council's payroll, or the town of Clayton's payroll, should be held to this cap. If we could turn to the final page titled Employment Cost Index Summary and read the highlighted paragraph starting with compensation costs for state and local government workers increased 2.7% for the 12-month period ending in June 2020. The third sentence then states that wages and salaries increased 2.6% in June 2020 and 3% the year prior. As you can see, this document is current as of the end of the June 2020 fiscal year and states clearly at the bottom that there was no impact to estimation procedures due to the pandemic. This document is directly from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics website. I am confident that offering a 10% salary increase cap is more than generous. To reiterate, state and local government workers have only seen average salary increases at best 3% in the previous 2 fiscal years. A 10% cap also leaves room for a higher percentage increase than average to account for managing the rapidly increasing population of Clayton and our town's ongoing projects. Do not misunderstand. We are incredibly grateful for all of you guys do for our community, but there must be checks and balances, and we as the people of Clayton are part of that system. I truly appreciate the council members lending me their ears for this particular issue, and I hope you will consider seriously my proposal and continue working with us for a better tomorrow. Thank you for your time, and have a good evening.
Thank you, Ms. Rogers. All right. Are there any others?
That is it. Thank you.
Thank you both for coming in and,
I'm sorry.
yeah, come on up and state your name for the record since we didn't have you on the list, I'll see, no problem.
They left, because what I got to say is a lot aimed at them. JD, I voted with you. I fussed and fought with you at planning board when you're planning director. Glad to see you in the position. There ain't nobody been a bigger thorn in these guys' butts than me over the past few years. What I like to say for the council is, number one, I understand contracts, and I understand there was a buyout clause, and I understand the money you pay. There's no doubt about it. I understand why you had to pay it. What I like to say is the best thing I like to see everybody do, best for Adam, best for the town of Clayton, is let's just move on. There's been a lot of things said, and a lot of this needs to quieten down. JD, I understand you're also doing the stuff for the sewer plant along with interim town manager. I don't think they're probably paying you enough for the headaches you got. I like to say that. So I'm easy. I'm out of here. Y'all have a good night.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, that concludes our public comment. I'll turn it over to council for comments. Mr. Grandis.
Mr. Mayor, first of all, I want to acknowledge the folks that spoke, especially Timothy Heiss and Caitlin Rogers. I respect their points of view and their positions, but I think also one of the most important things that all of us need to recall or remember is the fact that we are bound by various contracts when we make decisions. I may be mistaken, but I would suspect that the two folks that spoke may not be aware of what the contract agreements were. And obviously that's a part of the whole. With respect to the various salary information, I'm appreciative that that was given to us. But I think as all these members of the council realize, yourself included, we do salary surveys every year, or at least every other year, and we take those to heart, and I think that we do a pretty good job with respect to the salaries that we pay out. We're not the highest in our category, we're not the lowest, but we pay a good wage. And we have some very, very fine people on our staff, our entire staff. And the reason is because we treat them with a great deal of respect, and they do a really good job, and they appreciate being here and working here. I can certainly understand those two folks upset. And I only hope that they know all of the facts, not maybe one or two or three. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right. The only thing I need to add is that this week I did appoint Patrick Pierce to the Clayton Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors as our town representative. All right. Up next on the agenda is a closed session.
Move we go to closed session.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Carries.
And we're going up to room 223.
So I'll bring our meeting back to order. No action was taken during our closed session, and now I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you all. Good night.